This device here, this is actually a Bitcoin miner, but instead of mining Bitcoin, it's just creating heat and mining Bitcoin at the same time. The guys at 21 Energy who make this device are actually in the building, so do talk to them and ask them about the device. So yeah, when people say Bitcoin mining, a lot of people think of these giant sort of what they're called, containers full of Bitcoin miners. And in fact, it's as small as this. It can go in your home and it can heat your home while also mining some Bitcoin. Okay, Daniel, we want you back here, if that's okay. We might just go straight through. Is that fair? Yeah. Are you guys comfortable? Are you enjoying yourselves? Having a good time? Great, okay, in which case we'll just fire straight through into the panel this morning, our first panel, where we're going to discuss some of the learnings we had this morning. So Daniel, if I could welcome you back to the stage, that would be wonderful. Should we clap as well? Let's do some clapping. Why not? Why not? Okay. Next up, we have Erik Hersman. His work has been cited several times this morning already. Welcome Erik Hersman to the stage. Followed by Ali. Where is Ali this morning? Can I see him? There he is. Please give a really warm welcome for Ali. We'll wake you up. There it is. He is a solar mining specialist. And finally, Daniel Closer, who does work with Erik. So it's going to have a gridless focus. And the theme of this panel is stranded energy. Stranded energy, in one sentence, is energy without a buyer. Bitcoin mining could turn that problem into profit. So over to you, Daniel. The floor is yours. And I'll give you some more microphones. Do we need one more, or are we okay?
So this is really fun because these are the guys who are actually doing it. I get to talk about the theory of it. These guys are actually doing it around the world, finding areas in the world where there's stranded energy, wasted energy, and turning that into the future of sound money. So these guys are legends. We're very fortunate to have them there. My first question for each of you is, what do you see? How did you first get into this crazy idea that you could use Bitcoin to utilize stranded energy? Would love to hear just a very brief aha moment. What was it for you, Erik?
So it started by us just having conversations with these small energy producers across Africa. And it turns out that they just don't have a lot of usage of their energy. So they have to charge a lot for it to the local community, but they have a lot of wasted energy. So we just said, well, what would happen if we were to help take up that stranded power? And it turns out that you can do a lot with it. Like, one of those is that in some areas they're able to lower the price of power for people in the community, and in other places they can now put more meters on the grid itself, so expand their little mini grid. And we realized that there's something special here that helps make that energy producer a sustainable company. And allows us to make Bitcoin, but also helps the community to have a better life.
And Daniel, you're also working at Gridless. What was your aha moment that made you realize that Bitcoin mining could be a solution for stranded energy?
So I guess I came from the other side, because I spent the last 10 years building hydropower and mini grids. And I mean, as we've seen, there's a lot of actually wasted energy. And to try and build a profitable business out of a mini grid is, well, very difficult, to put it mildly. So if you look at the energy that's being wasted and you don't have a buyer for, you're just looking for where you can sell that energy. And this is where the Bitcoin network comes in. And this is a perfect match, because Gridless came from the mining space, I came from the energy space, and it's boom.
So you've now done 6 projects in Africa, is that correct?
Yeah, we've done 6 projects. So 4 hydro, we've done 1 geothermal and 1 biomass. We're in Kenya, Malawi, and Zambia, and then over the next year we'll have probably 3 more countries.
And how many of those projects would have been profitable if you were just doing the hydro grid by itself without the Bitcoin mining as a user of that hydro energy? What would have happened? Zero.
Yeah, it's nothing. Yeah.
Ali comes from the solar industry, so has a fascinating perspective as well. So what was your aha moment?
My aha moment came in Lisbon. Came in 2018. I've been working in solar since late 2000s, and sometime around 2014, 15, we started to see this trend of solar value deflation. as in the additional of every kilowatt hour of solar that gets put onto the grid actually begins to diminish the value for itself and for other solar projects that get added on. And around 2017, 2018, I got curious about Bitcoin, bought a Litecoin miner, an S9 Bitcoin miner, connected up to Raspberry Pi, did some testing. And the aha moment for us was when we realized how quickly you can turn these things on and off, and that it's not a wasteful source of energy or device for energy. It's actually a buyer of electricity, where we thought, well, maybe you can do the two and two together. If you pair up the excess solar that is beginning to get curtailed and losing value in wholesale markets, what if you had a buyer co-located right there with your plant that would monetize your otherwise wasted electricity? And whether it's a hydro, inline hydro, mini grid, or a solar project, the fundamentals of capital projects really drives down to the notion of utilization. When you're getting a project signed off by investors, one of the things they look at is how much capacity are you going to get out of the plant? Because it's never 100%. Often many devices you operate lower than 100. And then how much uptime are you going to get out of them? And in case of a inline hydro, you should in theory be able to run it 24/7 if the river is running year round. But if there's no load to buy it, you can't send power anywhere. Solar is the same thing. It's intermittent, that's fine, but within that intermittency, if you can't monetize 100% of your electricity generated, well, you're hurting your returns.
A lot of people, when I talk about Bitcoin mining using stranded energy, they'll say, well, can't you use it for something else? And sometimes they'll say, well, can't you use it for something more useful? I wish I'd all heard what Obi said, as if Bitcoin is not useful in and of itself. But putting that to one side, why is Bitcoin mining uniquely suited to stranded energy harvesting as opposed to another potential user of that energy?
Yeah, so one of the best things about Bitcoin mining is that it's a location agnostic buyer of last resort. And we can do real-time demand leveling for those grids. So by being, real-time, we mean that, right? So, and I think if there's any energy people in the room today, you should know this point, which is if you need to do frequency management, Bitcoin mining allows you to do that in sub-second intervals, right? This is really important if you're trying to run a mini grid in Africa or a large grid in Portugal, right? The same thing applies. But geographic agnostic means that we can drop a 20-foot container, which is 500 kilowatts of energy usage by Bitcoin mining, into any part of the world, right? So later on, I'll show you a picture of where we did that in very rural Zambia, and we have a Starlink that can connect us, and we also use the mobile network, and so we can do that anywhere in the world. And that's why I think Bitcoin mining is so powerful, is it allows you to go into places that no other industry could be the off-taker. Who here in energy thinks that you can build energy generation and not have an anchor tenant? You have to have an anchor tenant, right? Without an anchor tenant, your energy is not sustainable, it's not profitable. We provide that wherever we go.
And I think one of the things I've seen with that anchor tenant is when you're on the grid, the first thing you need in order to get investment is the investor says, well, who's the customer for your energy? And if you don't have a tenant, the answer is often, well, once we get connected to the grid, then we'll have one. But that grid interconnection can take years. And so that often these renewable projects don't even get investment. Ali, you were mentioning before about Bitcoin mining being able to turn on and off very fast. Why is that so important to a grid operator?
That really all comes down to grid stability. Like voltage and frequency management go hand in hand. And with penetration of renewables, if everybody is just adding renewables to the grid and the variability of solar and wind, it does cause the grid operators to have to constantly adjust generation and load as much as they can. They don't have much access to load. They haven't had much access to load. But with new programs, especially in Texas, which I'm sure we'll talk about, the ability to control load as well as curtailing generation now gives you two tools in the toolkit to be able to bring that balancing together. One thing I'll add to the previous question about what makes Bitcoin and Bitcoin mining unique as a value add is almost all energy sources are monetized within their geography where they are deployed, right? Think you produce solar, you sell it in that market, in that grid. You have natural gas, transportation of it is not really that flexible, but you sell it, in the North American market. There's pricing for different hubs. Bitcoin mining is truly the only way where you allow for electricity to have access to a global market, a 24/7 market. No power generation, the power generation industry has never had such a tool in its toolkit. Well, all of a sudden, you're not bounded by the geography you're in. You can, or the banking transactions or the 10-year contracts, you now have a buyer that's on all the time and can detach you from the local geography you're in and the local market you're in and give you revenues through this other network.
Sometimes people would say, well, if we've got a lot of renewables, we should be storing them in batteries, or we should be doing green hydrogen development. How is Bitcoin different from these other ways that you could utilize stranded? Because there are other ways you could utilize stranded energy. You could do pumped hydro, for example. But where has Bitcoin mining got some advantages or some synergies with these other forms? Yeah, anyone can answer that.
I think, batteries are extremely expensive. And I just had a conversation in the morning today. Like, if I compare the cost of batteries to building a hydropower site, there's a 10x there. I can get 10x the amount of energy out of a hydro site than I'm going to store in that battery. And batteries are just a storage. They don't actually create electricity. They just store it and buffer it. But with hydropower, I can create that electricity out of water. So I think that's very important. It's just phenomenal how expensive batteries are. And that's, I think, quickly glossed over in the media.
And green hydrogen?
Yeah, so I don't know much about green hydrogen, but I'm told it's not just, you can't just switch it on and off on a switch, because you're running a big industrial operation that has startup time, startup costs. You're not going to run it for 20 minutes because that's just not viable. But with Bitcoin mining, I can switch it on. Within a minute, I'm consuming power. I can do that for 10 minutes. I can shut it off again. So it's very flexible and very responsive.
So I'll in the interest of all not agreeing with each other, I'll push back. I'll take the other side. My business, what I do is solar, battery, project development, electrification, and we also operate some hydro assets as well. My view of Bitcoin mining is not that it's the best solution, toppling everything else, so ignore all the other solutions and just do Bitcoin mining. I see it as a tool in the toolkit for creating more power generation, more flexibility. Batteries are expensive. They have come down in cost. They will likely come down in cost even more. And look, we live in the real world, not in the idealistic world. Daniel and I, on our drive up here this morning, we're talking about how governments, geographies, because of policy, because of who we are as humans, we like to pick and choose winners and incentivize certain things. And it's almost always the wrong way to be incentivized, but it is what it is. And if you are in a situation where you're trying to bring power to a home, a community, if that geography has a tax credit, if it has incentives for battery that helps reduce that cost, you will do that. And that's why batteries are getting deployed. And yeah, green hydrogen, I'm a hater. And there are PDM electrolyzers. They are faster reacting, faster responsive. They are massively subsidized in the US, although that subsidy is going away. It's one of those energy sources of the future. We shall see. So I'm not active in it, but if it does actually become something that it makes sense at some point, sure, always happy to look at the finance and physics.
And there's certainly a lot of research saying that the two are not mutually exclusive. You can use batteries and Bitcoin mining together and then make decisions about, are you better, depending on the price of electricity, to sell that to the grid or to use it to Bitcoin mining? Erik, where do you see the future? How 600 million people in Africa are in energy poverty. What's the potential for your business and other businesses like yours to help those people?
Right. So I think this is where there's this is where the differences lie too with what Ali just said, right? Like when you're in here in Portugal or you're in the US, you're looking at energy a very different way than we are in Africa. First of all, most people in this part of the world aren't thinking about their Wi-Fi, their electricity being on for their fridge, for the hospital having electricity if you have to run there, those kind of things. You're kind of relying on it, right? So we sometimes are distanced from the fact that there is literally half the population of the continent that does not have access to any electricity. Not affordable energy, not affordable electricity, any electricity, okay? So when we look at the future, we look at these areas and we say, well, why is energy not being built there? Why hasn't it been built? Why are people not out there just going off and building more hydro like Daniel did, or more solar like Ali wants to, right? Like there should be people doing this. The reason why is because the average user of electricity in Africa uses 6.1 kilowatt hours a month, okay? So you have low consumption, which means that you will never be profitable if you're relying on the communities that have energy in them, that need energy in them, right? So what happens is you have to go spend $2 million for 1 megawatt of run-of-river hydro, okay, for example. And that's your lowest LCOE energy source in Africa, okay? So it's renewable energy by default, right, which is great. That's the best use case for us, is using renewable energy. But it also still has a high capex. So with the low consumption rate, by ordinary people, we'll never get there. So we have to take a look at that and say, well, where are these pockets of need? The truth is the energy companies, the utilities, have gone about as far as they will with both the distribution and the energy generation, because it's not good for their own ROI to go further into these smaller pockets of low density population, right? So they're not going there. So at the same time, the World Bank says there's 140,000 mini grids that are needed in Africa to solve the electrification problem. There's 5,000 that have been built. So we have a long way to go. But the only answer is to build small pockets of energy and then build mini grids off of it. So we have to look at that and we say, okay, well, this opportunity is actually quite interesting. The one place on Earth that needs the most electricity has some of the best renewable energy in the world as well. And finally, with Bitcoin mining being attached to it, it can be profitable. Now, that's an important part. It's never been profitable before, right? And you heard both Daniel and I say what would happen if Bitcoin mining wasn't there. It wouldn't be profitable. Real world examples of this. In Zambia, that site I talked about earlier, right? They built that site 15 years before we showed up. Not a single year had they even broken even on their OPEX, okay? That's a hard road to hoe. It means that grants and donation money is what is keeping these people electrified.
You can't scale something that's not profitable.
Yeah, you cannot scale this, right? So, Daniel, there's like two Daniels here. The other Daniel is the guy who built that site. He hears about what we're doing in Kenya and says, "Can you come and look at what we're doing in Zambia?" We say, "Sure." We look there. There's 36% usage of the grid, of his mini grid that he built, and that's about 1,000 households and about 250 to 270 businesses. This is small shops, this is maize mills, this is schools and clinics that are using this power, right? And that's still, after 15 years, you have 36% uptake of your energy, okay? So we show up with a 20-foot container. 2 days later, we've got this turned on, and he's looking at his phone, he's like, I just made money. Like, yeah, you just made money. You will make money every day. You'll be paid. And that is consistent. As long as there's water flowing down this river, and the world's dumbest computers, by the way, these Bitcoin miners are running, you will make money, right? And he finally had the ability to think strategically about his business and his grid. Since that time, another 400 households have been connected to that mini grid. A couple dozen new businesses have sprung up because of it. This is the future of electrification in Africa. It's this unlock that Bitcoin mining brings to profitability of off-grid energy that makes it possible.
I think we're just about out of time, so... Oh, one more question, okay. Ali, where do you see the future for solar and Bitcoin mining?
Yeah, you heard Erik mention about how Bitcoin mining is touted as the buyer of last resort, like when all else fails, that's that's the buyer of electricity that can be there and save your project. Where we are headed, and I believe you guys are too, is Bitcoin mining actually being the front runner, being the buyer of first option in order to activate new generation. I'll talk about this in my presentation if I can make it that far. Sorry, I'm struggling with some upset stomach this morning. But that's the big promise of can we use Bitcoin mining to future-proof a microgrid, a home that wants to electrify more stuff as we go down this path of electrify everything. And that's the part I've gotten a lot more excited over the years about where we can take this.
And I think that's exactly what Brad Jones, who is the CEO of ERCOT, which is the grid of Texas, said, where he said that Bitcoin mining is doing not one but two things. Firstly, it's helping to find a home for more solar and wind energy on the grid, because you're having that buyer, which means it gets investment, which means it doesn't get caught in an internet connection queue. It gets on the grid. Then once it's on the grid, it counterbalances the intermittency of renewable energy, so it's playing both roles. Please give it up for Daniel and Ali and Erik.